Welcome to episode 7 of the In the Name of Service podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Barb Thompson. Here we broadcast stories of men and women who've answered the call to serve in hopes of inspiring and catalyzing the rest of us to follow suit in our own way. Today's interview is with Brandon Wood. Brandon is a husband, father, special operations veteran, and associate pastor. I had the great opportunity to work alongside Brandon for a few years in our previous positions. He's insightful, caring, generous, and humble. I witnessed personally how he held up and supported so many men and women in our unit when we lost one of our own. His character was a bright light in a very dark place. In today's conversation, Brandon takes us through his own path of service, highlighting some of the extreme pain, heartache, and brokenness he has experienced. Have you ever hit so many obstacles you question if you're heading on the right path? This is the conversation you may need to hear today. If you've ever felt like you're going through hardship disqualifies you from making a mighty impact in the world around you, you'll be encouraged by Brandon's story. His life is proof that brokenness may just be the thing that best equips you for the healing that comes through serving others. I hope this conversation holds you up on your journey today, and that Brandon's words help bring you peace. For more information on personnel rescue, CSAR, the SOCOM Care Coalition, and how to stay in touch with Brandon, be sure to check out the show notes. Thank you for listening. Okay, Brandon, welcome to, or Woody. Can I still call you that?
You sure can.
Okay, welcome
Absolutely.
to the In the Name of Service podcast. We appreciate you being here. I do, and can't wait for everyone to hear from you. First, just tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Okay, so I'm Brandon Wood. I am a pastor. I'm an associate pastor at Aberdeen First Baptist Church in Aberdeen, North Carolina now. And I previously served in the military for 20 years as a pararescueman. Before that, I was raised here in North Carolina, right down the road in Rockingham, North Carolina, close to Fort Bragg. And so I grew up there and played a lot of sports. I was a baseball player growing up. I grew up in a pastoral home. My dad was a pastor. My mom was a school teacher. I just had a normal life. Kind of a middle lower class kind of upbringing. So I went through school and finished high school at Richmond Senior High, and like I said, I was a baseball player, and I left Richmond Senior High and went to the University of North Carolina at Pembroke to play baseball. I spent a very short period of time at Pembroke. I was there for about a semester. And just I was exhausted. I had been playing baseball my whole life. School was difficult for me. I was not living on campus. I was actually living in Richmond County and still commuting and trying to really just to kind of save money for my family. And ultimately, I got overwhelmed and I was exhausted. So I quit school. And I would say around the same time that all this was going on, I was beginning to kind of have a desire for the military.
Yeah.
I was raised not in a military home, but a very pro-military home. And my grandparents had served in the military. My grandfather was in World War II in the Navy. And even in our area, so just being from Richmond County and kind of around the surrounding area, I saw a lot of military people.
Right.
Got to know a lot of military guys. Just started having kind of a desire to serve. So I left school. I went to just normal kind of a everyday job for a little while. I worked in a parts department in a GM store in Richmond County, and was just kind of working through the process of going into the military. I thought a lot about the military, but I really was not. It wasn't like a patriotic, zeal to join.
Yeah.
But what kind of led me there was I really just kind of wanted to get away. I wanted to go experience something else. I was involved in things that I definitely shouldn't have been involved in, and the friend group that I was associated with was not the best for me. And I just began to realize, like, if I don't get out of here, if I don't go do something different, then it could end poorly.
Right.
So then joined the military, like I said, and really the rest was history. After that, I began as a security forces guy.
I didn't know that about
Um,
you.
yep, yep. So I was in security forces for about 4 years before I retrained into pararescue. And honestly, that's a big part of my story and what kind of led me to pararescue. So I was stationed at the 820th Security Forces Squadron in Valdosta, Georgia, at Moody Air Force Base, and there was a pararescue squadron there. So I got to know a lot of those guys through our Airman Leadership School,
Yeah.
and just really began to pursue and think about who they were and what they did. And it's interesting because when I kind of determined this is what I wanted to do, I couldn't swim. Like I
I was
could
just
kind of
thinking that. Could you already swim
yeah.
really well?
No, 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 not at all. So I could kind of, I could doggy paddle and make it from one side of the pool to the other, but could not swim at all. So I bought a book called Total Immersion, and I just started working. Like I started grinding, trying to figure out how to swim and to try to make it a reality. And then, so I was working through those things, and I was still deploying as a security forces guy. So in 2005, we deployed to Iraq,
Yeah.
and this was another kind of like, yeah, this is a definite now. I need to do this. But we were on a mission one day, and we did during this period we were doing like outside the wire kind of infantry type work, airbase defense, but active airbase defense. So we were going out doing patrols and just different things like that. And there was a day where there was an Army unit, an adjacent unit, who hit an IED,
Mm.
and we were in an adjacent village working, and we were actually doing what's called a med cap. So basically, we were in that village, and we had a PA with us, and he was there just doing medical treatment for some of the locals and seeing patients. So we got this call on the radio, and we ended up responding. So we responded to help pull security at the site, and this PA was able to respond. And the Army unit didn't have a medic with them.
Hmm.
Um, it was an interesting time, but anyway, they didn't have a medic with them, so nobody. It was like we came up to this guy who was injured from an IED blast, and nobody knew what to do. And
Right.
then I see this PA. He gets down and he's putting tourniquets on this guy and treating him, and in my mind, I was like, you know what? Like, I want to learn how to do that. I want to be able to learn how to, if somebody's injured, I want to be able to learn how to help them get back home to their families. And that was kind of a big change. So I get back from that deployment, and then I just really began to pursue pararescue. I was training every day. I was swimming 2 hours in the morning. So the pool was open for 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours at lunch, and then 2 hours for free swim in the afternoon. So I was spending somewhere close to 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, just trying to learn how to swim.
Wow.
And
It almost
and
doesn't
finally,
seem possible. That's
yeah,
crazy.
it was insane. Yeah, it was an insane period. But yeah, it was it was an overwhelming desire, and ultimately it was. I know that it was God. He was really calling me to this position and to
Mm-hmm.
this type of work. So yeah.
And you didn't stop there because when I met you, you were at the most elite Air Force ground unit. So you had not only put yourself through the kind of original assessment, gone
Right.
through everything, all the training. Was it like about 2 years, Brandon, for
Yeah, yeah.
pararescue?
So for a normal case, 2 years. Mine took more like about three, and this is important to my story as well. So
Yeah.
during the pipeline, so I had made it through the indoctrination course, which is kind of our selection course, and I went to military free fall school in SEER before I ever went to dive school. That's kind of a hard way to do the course because the underwater training and the training in the pool that you do at Indoc really is kind of pre-scuba and preparation for scuba school.
Right.
So I showed up to scuba school, and man, I was out of shape. I was not prepared because it was just, to me, it was just physically impossible. As a retrainee, I went back to my own to my unit, to my security forces unit,
Oh,
and had
wow.
to go to work every day
Yeah.
in between courses. So it was almost impossible for me to be able to keep up that level of training to be prepared for the rigors of dive school, which is, I mean, it's probably the
Yeah.
hardest thing I've ever done. I went to Army Ranger School as a security forces guy,
No
and
way. What?
people,
That's
yeah,
cool.
and people ask me like, what would you rather do? Dive school's like 4 weeks, and you get to go home at night and all that kind of stuff and eat good food. And I don't know, I'd probably rather go back and do Ranger School. I don't know, but but yeah. So during that dive school time frame, there was more to it than just kind of being out of shape. So the first class I was in, I made it through our pool week. I got a call that my wife was going to be going to have an emergency surgery, and at that point, I found out that she had been diagnosed with cancer,
Oh,
and she had thyroid cancer. And so, I told the cadre, I'm like, I'm going home. I need to be there for my wife. So I ended up leaving the course at that point and going home. And so that was kind of that led me kind of into having to do the course again. But
yeah.
I was able to come home, and fortunately Leah she's doing very, very well now. She's had a couple bouts with cancer, but she's in remission and doing very well. But anyway, so after that experience at dive school, I ended up going back. And the next time I go, I'm there, and I'm in the pool during pool week again, and I'm just having a ton of trouble with like I was getting dizzy and kind of disoriented and
Yeah.
stuff. So I end up one day saying like, "Hey, something's wrong," and they end up taking me to a doctor there, and I had an MRI, and they found a growth in my sphenoid sinus.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
yeah, so this growth was like it was messing with me when I was trying to dive, and thankfully they found it before I did like the deep dive and stuff, which that could have been a big problem.
Yeah.
So anyway, I ended up coming back to Moody Air Force Base, reporting back to the 820th, and while I was there, it was I had surgery, so they removed it, they fixed the deviated septum and a lot of stuff, and then I had tons of trouble getting back into the program, getting somebody to give me a waiver to get back into pararescue.
Mm-hmm.
So ultimately, I did get a waiver, and I was able to pursue going back. So at this point, I'd been out of the training pipeline for so long, I had to go back to Medina to the schoolhouse, the pararescue schoolhouse, go through a pre-scuba course. So I did this pre-scuba week, and this is the point of my story where I mean, my wife's diagnosed with cancer is a big part of my story, but
Yes.
this next portion is kind of like where everything changed. So when I was in Medina, it was a Friday, and so I'll never forget. I looked at my phone. I saw that my little brother was calling me,
Yeah.
and I threw the phone down and went to get into the shower. And I just said, I got to get ready because there are people waiting on me. We're going to eat. We're going to hang out or whatever. So by the time I got back out of the shower, I had like, I don't know, 15 missed calls.
Oh no.
Yeah, and my wife finally um, gets in touch with me, and she gave me kind of the hardest news I'd ever heard in my whole life, that my youngest brother Trenton, that he had taken his own life.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and so it was a definitely a terrible, terrible time for me, and I definitely had to step back, and I didn't end up going to dive school, of course. Right after that, I came home to be with my family and to mourn and all the things that goes along with that. After that, I was able to get back to dive school and finally graduated. And so my pipeline was a little longer than everybody else's, but yeah, and a lot. It was a lot to go through during those periods. And this is another very important thing during that period, especially during all the different, like I'm not making it through dive school. I'm having to wait. My wife gets diagnosed with cancer. My brother passing away. I just began to question it all.
Right.
Am I supposed to be doing this?
Right.
Like, I don't know if I'm supposed to be doing this at all.
Like it's a
Um,
pretty jagged path at this point.
yeah, yeah. I was thinking, I'm the oldest son, and there was a lot within me that was saying, like, you need to go home. Like, you need to
Yeah.
be there for your family
Mm-hmm.
and different things like that. So yeah, it was definitely a difficult path to get through pararescue. And then, like you said, the getting to the unit, to the pinnacle of
Right.
pararescue. That to me, I was at Moody Air Force. I went back to Moody Air Force Base, actually, to the 38th Rescue Squadron as a pararescueman, which was awesome. To go back and to be with some of the people who had helped me, like, train and equip me to go through the pipeline.
Yeah, so neat.
And so I'm there, and I had only been there a few years. Matt Wells, who was the chief at the time, he called me into his office one day and he said, Brandon, he said, like, I know that you're interested in going to the 724th. And he said, you're, like, really hot to get overseas orders.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, if you don't go now, like, you're probably going to get overseas. And then you have a period of time once you get overseas before you can ever come back and even assess and try. So he said, if you feel like you can go and try now, then now is the time to do it. So he made a call. He called CZ and talked to him, and basically they scheduled a time for me and one other operator to come up and to assess, just two of us
Oh, wow.
individually.
Mm.
It was a whole different process that we went through
Mm-hmm.
than what the guys go through now. So we came up and assessed together, and yeah, got selected.
That may
And
have
then
been a
you go
little
through.
tougher. There's only two of you to look at,
Yeah,
the pressure's spread right now.
yeah, it was interesting. It was an interesting time. So you did that. It was interesting back then. So you'd come up and do a short assessment, and I think they were just seeing trainability,
Sure.
and kind of where you were at that point. And then they would move you. They would PCS you and your family here before you ever even went through selection. So it
Right.
was kind of
It was
an interesting
risky.
period. It was risky. Yeah, there was a lot of risk involved with trying to come and pursue this place. And I think that was one of the reasons why a lot of guys didn't do it back then.
Yeah.
It was just risky.
Right. Yeah, especially
Yeah,
if you have a family. It's hard
right,
to it's easy to put yourself at risk, I think, for a
right,
lot of you guys, but not necessarily your family. So, well,
right.
now kind of being on the other side of all this amazing work that you got to do in the military, what do you think stands out as your most meaningful experience during your Air Force service?
There's quite a few things, but I would say the most meaningful experience was being able to be a team leader at the unit here.
Yeah.
To me, like, it was everything I'd ever dreamed of and everything I'd ever worked towards, to be able to come here and lead this caliber of men. Just being here at the unit was an extreme highlight for me. And also I have one mission that kind of is a highlight. So when I was stationed at the 38th, we were deployed. We were at Kandahar, and we were flying personnel recovery CSAR kind of mission set during
Mm-hmm.
that time frame with the Pedro aircraft. And there was one mission one day where we flew out, and it was kind of a basic mission to begin with. We were flying out to go pick up a person who was injured, and I think it was even like maybe a fob to fob transfer. So it was just like going to another base and picking a patient up and coming back to the higher level of care. And while we were en route, like while we were flying over, we saw, like, we visibly saw an IED go off.
Oh,
And you could see that there were a group of people on the ground. So we immediately, like, re-rolled
wow.
and landed at the point of injury. And so that moment, these were Air Force EOD guys.
Mm.
And so it was extremely real because they were wearing the same exact uniform we wear.
Right.
Like,
Oh, yeah.
we have different uniforms between the branches, and they were wearing the same uniforms we do. And we picked up these guys, and it was a tragic scene. There were numerous people that lost their lives, but I was able to, on that mission, really put my training into action. One of the guys, he had pretty crazy facial injuries, and it had kind of dislocated his airway.
Mm-hmm.
So he couldn't breathe. He was really struggling to breathe. So I was able to crike him and perform kind of life-saving intervention. And that was the first time that I was able to be a part of saving a person's life.
Yeah. Wow.
And Yeah, and that really, that was kind of a very important moment in my pararescue career.
All that work put to good
Yeah,
use. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, tell us about your transition from the military into ministry.
So about 5 years before I separated, we were on a training trip to Wyoming, and we were doing a lead climbing course. And I was lead climbing, and I fell, and I broke both of my feet.
Oh,
Um, yeah, at the same time, broke both of my feet. During that moment, it was really interesting because my identity was really wrapped up in being a pararescueman.
mm-hmm.
I identified, like, I'd worked so hard to be a special operator, and my identity was so wrapped up in this. So I fell and I hurt myself, and it was almost like it was taken away in an instant.
Right.
I still operated for quite a few years after that, and then went to the DET and taught our operator training course and led there. But it was almost like all this that I'd worked for kind of had come to an end, because I was never truly physically the same
Mm-hmm.
anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It was like when we were out on training missions and on missions, it was like I was just hanging on, and it came at a great cost, physically, mentally, emotionally, So anyway, during that period though, it was like God began to take this idol
Right.
in my life, and it was like He began to just kind of take it away in an instant.
Mm.
And I was already at that point kind of toying with the notion of ministry. I'd started school at Liberty University, and I was working on a biblical studies degree, and I was kind of just toying with the idea. But it was during that period I had a lot of highs and lows, and it was during that period though that I really began to see that God was calling me, to full
Mm-hmm.
time vocational ministry. I had no idea what that looked like though. It you just don't know. I mean, I had never even like truly thought about what it would look like post military life, but it was really amazing too to watch how God worked in in that situation. So after that, I came off the tactical teams. I went to the DET, and while I was at the DET, this job at the church where I am now, it opened up, and it was interesting because we were at an event at the church that we attended at the
Mm-hmm.
time, and the former pastor was there, and he came up to me and he said, there's this position at this other church, and I think it would be perfect for you. I think you should pursue it. I think you should think about it. And I remember getting in the car and talking to my wife and saying, this would be awesome, but it's impossible.
Yeah.
It's just impossible because of the timeline.
Right.
Like the timeline just didn't add up. Through just a lot of different events and different things, the time did line up. I was able to begin to work part-time here.
Mm-hmm.
And then following working part-time, I was able to do an internship here through the SOCOM Care Coalition. So the last like 6 months of my military service, I interned here at the church, while kind of still working some at the DET during that period in transition. But I was able to come here and work. And once I finished working here during that period, I came on full-time right as I got out of the military. So
Yeah.
it was just interesting that what I thought could never happen, like, and I think about that often. Like, I can't ever tell God that this can't work or that can't happen, because He can move mountains.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
You go from one form of service to another. What has the sacrifice looked like for you and your family throughout the military and ministry service? I mean, typically
Yeah.
you're kind of giving up one thing to put yourself into another. So just curious about that.
I would say every type of service comes with sacrifice. It has to. The military, I was gone so much.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was the biggest sacrifice. Leah and I, we sat down and kind of have talked about how much I was gone in the past, and it was constant. I mean, we
Right.
were 200 days. There were years where it was closer to 300 days.
Yeah.
In a year being gone for many, many years, and so time away from my family, and as my kids started getting a little older, that really just it began to be it just got harder and harder
Mm-hmm.
to be away. So definitely time away from family, time away from kids. You have to sacrifice things that are normal to a lot of people. At the unit, we were on alert and stuff. So you couldn't be with outside a certain time of response back to the
Right.
unit if something was to happen. So
Yeah.
that also was a sacrifice, and stuff like that happened often. You'd be, you know, living normal life and then have to leave.
Right.
So that was definitely a sacrifice. And then, ministry as well. A lot of times you have to respond to crisis that other
Yes.
people are going through.
Right.
And, it's a part of the job, and it's a part of the job that we love.
Mm-hmm.
I would say
Mm-hmm.
the same thing with the military, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's deploying and training and all those things. That's what you love, and you're doing your job, and you're doing what you want to do and what you have to do, but it comes at a cost. And the same with ministry. So a lot of times you're responding to needs. I can think specifically about an instance like, on the 4th of July. We're having a 4th of July party, and we're, swimming and having a good time, and then, in a moment
Right.
you have to leave,
Right.
and go respond. And you want to. I mean, I'm called to be a pastor and to be there for the sheep that God has entrusted here in this congregation to me. And so you want to be there. You
Mm-hmm.
feel like you need to be there. You feel like God has equipped you to be there. So it's hard. It's hard to kind of balance. But that's something too, though, that I think is so important. Recognizing that it always comes at a cost. And then how do you balance those? You have to have balance. You have to have order
Mm-hmm.
um, in your life, and you have to make sure that you prioritize certain things. You got to prioritize your faith, then your family, then everything else after that. Because if your faith is not right and your family's not right, then you really can't respond in any meaningful way to circumstances in other people's lives.
Yeah. Has there ever been
Yeah.
a moment in time when it was becoming overwhelming where you thought maybe the investment wasn't worth it?
The military, definitely.
Yeah.
There were periods where you really kind of around the 10-year mark. I think every person kind of is like, is it worth it? Because if I go past 10, I'm going to do 20.
Mm,
Because most guys do that. If they go
right.
past 10, they're doing 20. But up to that 10-year mark, you're kind of like, I still can potentially leave or whatever. So I would say at that point, we really had to count the cost.
Yes.
And there were moments in time where, yeah, I mean, I definitely thought about giving up, throwing in the towel, and trying to find something easier to do. I don't know.
It's a
And
nice
and
thought when you're,
yeah,
suffering, I'm sure.
yeah. I would say the ministry, it's a little different because, I have an overwhelming desire. That's what the Bible says. If you have the desire or aspire to the office of overseer, then you aspire to a good work. So I have the overwhelming desire
Yeah.
to pastor and to serve in this capacity in the local church. So even when it's hard, and even when there's highs and lows, I think that my call is always there.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea of leaving ministry, no, I really don't ever foresee me leaving ministry. I think I will be preaching, teaching people the Bible, for the rest of my life. But there are times in ministry where you have to discern maybe what's next,
Yeah.
or have you been just being equipped and trained where you are for the next thing? Just thinking through all those things, it's kind of a difficult thing to discern. So I don't think with ministry there's ever really been a desire to hang it up. I just don't think I can hang it up. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, it sounds like for you, the strong desire it just keeps you motivated
Right.
to do the work. What would you say, just practically speaking, like who or what are there specific things that you remind yourself of? Are there specific people that kind of check you on if the balance is off, just to help you kind of, maintain the course?
Yeah, my wife, she's my partner in ministry. She's my rock. she stood with me through so many things. We went through so much, talking earlier about all the things we went through. We've gone through so much together that we have, I think, very healthy communication.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I think that was the key to our success as a military couple,
Yeah.
is we just communicated. So she has always driven me. So I think back to, when I was talking about my brother passing away, and
Yes.
and almost coming to a point then where I was thinking about quitting pararescue and coming home and trying to figure out like what I was supposed to be doing. She pushed me then. Like, she really pushed me and said, "No, you'll regret it if you quit."
Yeah.
And I would have. So she pushed me in that moment, and she's always like, she holds me accountable. We are a team, and everything, every decision that we make, we seek to make those together.
Mm-hmm.
She's been my rock. She's helped me continue at every point throughout all of this.
Yeah, it sounds like the strong desire. She's got a little bit of her own too.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
What kind of advice do you have for people out there of any age and any specialty that may feel this similar call to serve, but they don't know like how to start?
Well, I think first it's praying for guidance, seeking guidance from God, and I think utilizing your giftedness is so important. Like, each individual person has been uniquely gifted in some way, and I think if we will look at ourselves and see what that truly is, and will pursue that, then I don't think you can ever go wrong in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
I think over time, your thought about serving or what you're doing might change or shift or whatever. But I think ultimately, just utilizing what God has blessed you with, the skills, the giftedness that He's blessed you with, and then also just being willing to work. In the beginning, I talked about having to learn how to swim. And
Yes.
I think, you have to, there might come a point where you feel led to something, but you don't feel prepared.
Right.
So you have to work. You have to work to prepare yourself for service. But another very important thing is about service in particular is that it's so healing.
Mm.
It is such a healing thing to serve. So if a person has gone through a lot of hardship,
Mm-hmm.
looking back on my path, there was a lot of pain and heartache and brokenness and just hardship. I see now that all of that was working in me, this desire to serve. It was growing, this desire to serve, because there's a guy, Steve Lawson, he's a pastor, and I love listening to him preach. But one of the things he said is for God to use a man greatly, He has to break a man greatly.
Oh, wow.
And I see a lot of times that, like, people who have been broken, people who have gone through hardship, tend to serve. And I think that as you continue with this podcast, you're going to see that more and more in
Yeah,
people.
definitely.
That there's been a lot of brokenness that has led to service, and service is so healing. Healing through service is one of the phrases that I say a lot, and I truly believe in. Ultimately, like you and I've talked about before, but
Mm-hmm.
ultimately it's we all have this desire to be at peace, and to have rest in our lives and to have meaning.
Yes.
And I think, first off, there's only one true source of that peace, and I believe that's Jesus Christ. And I do believe, as people navigate this world, and as they sense that they're broken and their need for, forgiveness, that ultimately, coming to Jesus with faith, with a heart of repentance, the freedom that comes along with that,
Mm-hmm.
that's the first step towards freedom. But then also, I would say, out of a heart of service and serving the greater good, there's healing there as well. It's an addition to that, the true healing that you find in Christ.
And that
Yeah.
can be done anywhere. Like you could start
Oh yeah.
today.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's you can start right now where you are.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
Agreed. No special, you don't need to swim.
Nope. You don't need to swim.
You don't have to learn how to swim.
Nope.
You don't need any special degrees
Nope.
or background. Yeah.
No, not at all.
Awesome.
Yeah, I love the passage of scripture. Come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. And I've seen that. I've seen that rest given to people when they come to Jesus. Just rest and peace and hope that really can't be found anywhere else.
Well, I think that's the mic drop. And
Mic drop.
yeah. Thank you so much for
Yeah,
spending some time to have this conversation. And thanks
absolutely.
for all you've done and all you continue to do. You know, you wanted to travel the world and you did, but you also came
Yeah,
right back to North Carolina. So,
I did. I did. I spent most of my military career in either Georgia or North Carolina, so I
best of
didn't get
both
to
worlds,
see.
I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, thanks, Brandon.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much. I really appreciate what you're doing because I think that this is so important for people who are contemplating service to be able to just to hear these stories.
I hope so.